to empower you with the knowledge, but mostly share our own lived experiences and help you understand the decision-making process when you're thinking ahead. So drop your questions into the chat box. I know many of you submitted lots and lots of questions prior to the event, which we have pre-answered in a Google Doc that you will receive during the chat. So this is supposed to be as interactive as we make it. So use the chat box to share your thoughts, okay? The first thing that I want to mention is, because you have to understand that everyone's immigration related story is a little different from the next person's. So we are not immigration experts. We just have our stories to share, right? We are not immigration experts, but we are educators. We studied and observed and practiced career strategy, and we have ourselves been international students and postdocs. I am the Director of Futures, the Career Office for Hopkins PhDs and postdocs, and Louise is Assistant Director and Life Design Educator in the Life Design Lab that services undergraduates. So after I share my thoughts with you, stick around because Louise is going to share some excellent perspectives, some cool life design perspectives that you're going to enjoy, okay? So that's what I wanted to say, and let's just begin right off the bat. So my educational story begins in Bangalore, India, where it is usual to have 3 majors. So I majored and graduated with chemistry, microbiology, and botany. In addition to studying, I was pretty active in extracurricular activities like debates and music. And this fact is important because it forms a part of who I am. From there, I wanted to study abroad, but we didn't have the money to pay for a US education. So we reframed that thought, and I decided I would go to New Zealand. When I reached New Zealand, I was absolutely clueless, especially in the labs, because I'd never even used a handheld pipette before. So I'd spent the first 6 months over there really catching up and working really hard. But when I did catch up, I graduated top of the class and experienced some of the best research and mentorship in a lab I've ever received. And I'm telling you this because excellent universities and research organizations and mentorship exist outside, and I wouldn't have known had I not explored that for myself. But I decided to move to the US as a student, where as a graduate student, or any time you spend 5 years or more at some place, there are a lot of ups and downs, but overall it was an enriching experience. And I'll share a little bit about what I did during that time. I didn't go home, and I want to share this with you, for 5 years during grad school. I didn't take a vacation, I didn't leave, because I was working all the time and the lab culture was pretty much very competitive. From there, I moved to the FDA as an ORISE fellow, did my postdoctoral fellowship. I was again international there for most of my time there. After about 1.5 years of that, I started exploring options outside bench work. And as a postdoc, I spent 4 years at the FDA. So about 1.5 years into it, I was already realizing that I didn't want to do bench work. And I'll explain again the thought process behind that so you can understand where that's coming from. So then, for me, I'd say I belong to the privileged category because I was able to get my green card. And then I was the Associate Director of Postdoctoral Affairs at the NIH, the National Institute on Aging. And since January, I've been at Hopkins. So it's been about 6 months now as the director of this new office called Futures. It's the career office, caters to folks at the Homewood campus. So I will highlight to you some decisions, as I said, about some steps that I made along the way in a future slide. But that's my story, right? Okay, hey, what? So I have someone in the chat box saying that they're also from my home city and went to Bishop Cotton's, which is exactly where I went to high school. So that's my story. I want you to share with me what's your story. Someone just shared a piece of who they are, where they're from. Tell me which country you're from, put it in the chat box, and then tell me one thing that you miss about your country. And I will put what I miss in there, and it's called biryani, and it's one of these like foods that are authentic that you just can't replicate anywhere else. So where is everyone else from? Okay, another Bangalorean like me. Where else? I know we have folks from China. I know we have France, Louise. We have Nepal. Where else? India. Okay, great. All right. Palestine, awesome. Bangladesh, Denmark, Germany, Colombia, Korea, Mexico, biryani, great. Portugal, awesome. Awesome. Keep it going. Your story is important, okay? So I want to emphasize again that everyone's story is important. Vishal says Bengal and he misses fish. Okay, awesome. So I want you to know, for those that are not an international student, but for those who have forgotten what it takes to be an international student, is that it is way more than just being one or two things. As an international trainee, you are a whole person. When we come to the US, we're not only learning research skills, working on projects, thesis, mentoring, learning, studying, making mistakes, failing. We're navigating interpersonal relationships as well, managing long distance connections, learning to adjust to new people. Some of us are thriving, some of us are missing home, some of us are feeling like we don't belong, while some of us fit right in. All this while trying to adjust, like I said, to learning a new language, feeling imposter fears. Then add on maintaining and tracking your immigration statuses and what options we have. So when it comes to careers, I understand how thinking about something that's such a big deal can feel overwhelming, right? At some point, early, middle, or even later stages of your PhD or postdoc, we do reach a decision-making step about careers. I have to figure out whether to stay or go, what is available to me, what isn't, what do I like, what I don't. There are a lot of questions, right? In fact, there are so many questions that when you guys registered today, there were about over 70 questions that we figured we will not be able to cover all of those answers. And like I mentioned, we wrote up all the answers and we will share it in a Google Doc with you soon. But anyway, I parsed all your questions and I put it into this world map. And as you can see, many of you are asking about jobs, careers, internet, OPT, visa, networking, industry, and all these other words you see here, right? So let's begin. If I were to break it down for you into 5 actionable steps you can take when strategizing and thinking ahead, this is what I can tell you. Step 1 would be communication. And we'll get into that. What does communication entail? Here are the words associated with that. Your advisor, family, OIS, peers, lawyers, careers office. Knowledge, immigration, self, strengths, knowledge of career options, knowledge of paths, knowledge of self. Timeline, when does your program end? When does your contract end? When does your visa status expire? How long does it take for a job, an interview process? How long does it take for sponsorship? Self-investment, very important step. How do you build your resume? How do you network? How do you ask questions? How do you stay competitive when you're sort of operating from a limited space, right? How do you prioritize wellness? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? And step 5 is taking action. How do you prepare? How do you ask for help? How do you use your strengths to find the job that you've narrowed down for you? I stressed communication at the very beginning because in every step of this international navigational job careers process, you cannot live inside your research bubble. And I'm telling you from experience. Before you know it, years have gone by and one has missed out on communicating your experiences, your needs, your desires, and future goals, right? Communication seems to be the #1 step in this whole process. And by that, I mean, it entails really speaking with your advisor and teammates. Sometimes great advisors are willing to listen to your international story, help you make these connections that you need, and basically do what a good advisor should. But this is academia, and this is always the case. I'm aware of that. In that case, you could find additional mentors to talk to and make all parties aware of the immigration-related issues you anticipate or you're facing. When I was a grad student, I became best friends with the international office back at the University of South Carolina. And that line of communication was very important and essential, if you ask me, because when I needed my I-20 stamped or needed to figure out what my changes to status meant, that's who I would go to. So again, you need to be able to have lines of communication between these various parties. Communicate with your family and peers, if for nothing else, for support. I emphasize if you're working with, say, a lawyer to communicate about jobs, again, you have to be able to talk back and forth with that lawyer during that whole process. Some of you asked, when should I communicate with a recruiter and potential employer? And in that case, I'm going to say from the beginning, your lines of communication should be open. And I'm going to share with you now personal examples of communication breakdowns in my own experience. But before I do, I want you to know that in this process, you're not alone. These people form sort of your team as you go forward, okay? So you're not alone, and don't try to operate alone. Very often I'll get a PhD student or a postdoc who frantically reaches out with only 2 weeks on their visa and saying that they don't want to go back home, but that they want their job, right? That they want a job. So it's very hard to help people who have 2 weeks left on their visa. So we're sitting there and quickly writing to PIs and postdocs and stuff like that. So reach out early on in the process. Here's an example. So I was a postdoc at the FDA, and 3 years had gone by. I was an OPT. During my 3rd year of my OPT, in September 17th, I remember September 17th because August 28th, I had just gotten engaged to my husband. And September 17th, I got a message from, there was no career center, there was no international office. It was the contracting agency who said they kind of slipped up and didn't process my J1 visa. I was supposed to switch over to J1. So then they told me I have to go back to India for 5 to 6 months or stay here for that time while on unpaid absence. So I'm gonna showcase over here. Okay, so they said unpaid absence, go back home, wait for the processing to happen. I had a car, I had an apartment, I was paying rent, I couldn't get out of a lease, I had a fiance, I had dogs, I had everything, right? So I wrote to them saying, I'm shocked to hear about that I have to go back, this is insane. Now you're telling me that the processing is going to take 5 to 6 months. And I kind of shifted blame a little bit on the agency. And I said, I didn't receive any advance notice from you. But in hindsight, I didn't pay attention to when my OPT was expiring. I didn't know anything about the J1 process. In that last week, I studied all about J1s. I said, oh my gosh, a J1 visa requires a waiver. When can I get a waiver? What happens if my waiver doesn't get approved? I wrote to them. And then because I said I was engaged, I belong to one of those lucky category people. I had to decide whether to go on J1 or just get an adjustment of status, get married, and get a green card. It was just a mess. And I cannot explain to you the anxiety and the stress that I kind of brought upon myself, right? So I just wanted to share that personal story with you because I wasn't paying attention to timeline. I think this partly inspired me to help other people make a decision very early on. That's an example of a communication breakdown. Another example is I was fine, like I had a green card. I was applying for positions. I interviewed, went through 4 rounds of interviews with a federal contracting agency. And in my last round of interview, when they were offering me the job, I said, I just want to make sure I'm not a US citizen. Is this okay? And they're like, oh no, we can only employ US citizens. We can't employ green card holders. Again, communication breakdown. None of that was discussed early. So for someone who had asked, I think Numer, you asked, like, when do you reach out? You reach out and you communicate with your employers early on in the process. You have to be able to close that communication loop. Okay, so that was step 1. Step 2, we as PhDs are always in the pursuit of knowledge all the time, right? Researching that pathway, that mechanism, that piece of literature. The more we know, the more we can build plans, experiments, write books and articles. The same applies for learning about the less exciting stuff like visas, finances, and career paths. The more you know, the more you're able to make a decision as to what you do with that knowledge. When it comes to visas, the trick here, again, you have a team, but the trick here is to be able to self-advocate. There are so many resources available to us as students. It requires us to be proactive to learn about our statuses. And I've included over here the OIS, Office of International Services at JHU, the UCSD version, Berkeley version for all of you on the West Coast from those universities. You have options to study and educate yourself about what your visa is and what it entails, right? What is an F1 visa? What's a CPT versus OPT? What is an OPT? When you extend, how do you go from OPT to H1B, H1B to green card? What are the stipulations of my J1 visa? What is the J1 waiver? All this information, you need to be able to be a self-advocate, find out, and there are people there to help you. Okay, from my experience, if you use anything that you can take away is that additional stress was completely unnecessary. Had I talked to peers before, had I talked to a lawyer before, I'd have gotten some info. And I'll answer the questions in the chat box pretty soon. Many of you have asked, how do I stay aware of the OPT timeline? Well, really, what you need to know is that if you're near your last year of your PhD, like some of you in the chat box have mentioned, you should apply for an OPT up to 90 days before graduation. So say your graduation date corresponds with the end date stamped on your I-20, then 90 days before that, you should be applying for an OPT. When you get an OPT card, you have to decide during that process when will be the start date. So you have 60 days to hold any start date you wish for your OPT to begin, your EAD card to begin. If you're in the STEM field and humanities field, you can get the 12 months of OPT. Humanities folks, so sorry that this extension doesn't apply to you. You get 1 year of OPT, whereas STEM folks can at least apply for the 24-month STEM extension. So when do you apply for the extension? Again, 90 days before the end date on the EAD card. So what happens between this graduation end date and the time that you start your job in the 60-day period? You have to save up. I didn't. I was working in the lab, and then I ran out of money because they couldn't pay my stipend because I graduated, right? Save up, anticipate this. And all these, when you're working with a timeline, it involves strategy, which is what we're trying to discuss. So say you're not an OPT, F1 OPT student, say you're a postdoc, and you're on a J1. Understand a few things, that J1 is not a dual intent visa, which means you cannot immigrate with a J1 if your country requires you to have the 2-year home residency option. As Louise is going to say, for her, she moved from J1 to green card because her country, France, doesn't require 2-year home residency, whereas my country requires one, which means I cannot move. Even if I married someone from a J1 to a green card, I cannot do a marriage-based petition. So if you have that option, or you have that stipulation that you have to complete it to your home residency, then understand that the waiver process exists. The J1 waiver process means you don't have to go back to your country if you get a no objection statement from your home country. So that's one side. And on the other side, from the US, you got to do the US paperwork. Of course, this means also that you need to have a job offer. Be aware of your timelines and options. Sometimes as an international student, really, it feels like we're operating from within a box where it seems like everyone else has sort of unlimited options, right? Like there's a pathway open here, here, here. And for humanities students with the option of only 1 year OPT, that can feel even more limiting. So what are some of the strategies to open up some paths for ourselves and work within these restrictions that we have? I have a suggested timeline for us. So I want you to know first that whenever I advise students, I say it can take anywhere between 6 months to a year to look for a job. If you're trying to apply for like a postdoc in government, it's even slower. Like the FDA postdocs, for instance, I graduated in July, technically I defended in July, interviewed in July, and only started in November. So say an average grad school years are 5 years and a postdoc lasts for 4 years. So these numbers here are year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What can you do? In year 1, 2, 3, 4 and beyond, explore different careers, explore who you are, keep exploring. That's the exploration phase, right? In year 1, 2, 3, 4 onwards, gradually build up your network, gradually build up your resume. If you're in year 3 or 4, that's a good time to try job shadowing or internships. If you're a JHU Hopkins student, humanities student, we're starting a humanities internship option soon. Check into that as well. All these things sort of, for the most part, they don't require visas unless you're trying to shadow someone in a federal agency. Then if you're not a US citizen, you can. But for the most part, building your network, working on your resume, filling in the gaps doesn't require a visa, right? Very early on, learn how to build your application materials. And real life example, as I help students transition into other positions, in the very last month, there'll be an important job opportunity that comes forth, and they ask me to review their resume or the CV, and I have to write it from scratch because it's never going to pass through the application process for that company because of the state in which it's in. Learn how to build awesome application materials early on. That's why we've already had a resume workshop, 2 LinkedIn workshops. Like, I want you to know your options. And then in your year 5, when you're starting your year 5, The additional stress of graduating, saying goodbye, visas, you can reduce that stress because you're already prepared and you're ready for action. So I always say that being prepared doesn't guarantee success, but it helps you guarantee at least confidence. So you can build up that confidence. And one way to do that is really spending some time to invest in yourself and your career. So what I mean by exploring? Some of the broader questions you can ask yourself are, what are my strengths and limitations? What are you good at? What could you improve upon? What are you learning? What experience overall are you accumulating? What inspires you? So let me ask you this. How do you know if you're good at something? Like, you can put it in the chat box. How do you know if you're good at something? And I'm going to wait until someone responds. How do you know? If people come to you for help, if they compliment you, you won't know if you're good at something, okay, if people tell you, all right, yeah. If you see the results, if your level of productivity in that area is high, if you're applauded for your work, when you're creating original content, if you enjoy it, correct. I'm going with what Priya is saying a little more. You know if you're good at something if you try stuff. Like, if you don't try things, you won't know. You won't know whether you're good at something or not. Like, how do you know stuff if you don't try stuff, right? Whenever you're happy and satisfied, how will you know if you're happy and satisfied if you don't try stuff? How do you know if you're interested about a particular career path? You ask people, you go to events, you meet people, you talk to people, you ask these important questions. What do you like about your job? Get curious and try stuff. And this is a principle that life design teaches as well. Get curious, try stuff, talk to people, collaborate. So let me show you my personal example, okay? So of my thought process behind all this, right? You feel passion for it. More so than passion, because passion can be many passions for one person. Think about what inspires you rather than what you're passionate about. Because I'm passionate about dogs and music, right? But what inspires me? Helping people inspires me. So let's see some of the thought process of decisions that I made. Here I am in grad school. What I loved about research was problem solving, curiosity, data, innovating, the creativity part. What I hated about grad school was animal work, grant writing. I couldn't see the impact of my work like immediately. I hated the work-life balance. I had to go to lab, like I worked all the time. I didn't like academic politics. I understood that part. During that time, what I did was, during my grad school, and you'll wonder where I made the time, I was an Energizer bunny, like at that point. Now I can't imagine having done all this, but I had other experiences. President of Medical Graduate Student Association, Indian Student Organization, International Student Association, helped found the African Student Organization, co-chair of the Society of Toxicology, performed on stage. Like, I did all these other things, other experiences that I thought that I wouldn't put on my CV. Got some awards and honors, both in research and leadership, went to conferences, right? What I learned from that experience was I like leadership, I like mentoring, I like teaching, I like public speaking, I like helping others, and I like having a work-life balance, right? Although now I realize there is no such thing as work-life balance, there is just something called work-life integration. At that moment in grad school, guess what? I had no clue about career paths. I assumed my next step would be an industry position, okay? I had no, I thought there was a no choice option. I didn't even know what choices I had. Basically, I didn't have a career service. I didn't ask for help. I had no clue. So then I clearly just listened to what my PI said, and I said, I will do a postdoc. Although my PI was telling me to do an academic postdoc and get an academic job, I literally said, I want my options to open up. So I'm going to do an FDA postdoc. So in case I can somehow go into a government or industry. At the postdoc level, I realized I don't like bench work. I needed work-life balance. I had a baby, so my priorities shifted, and I just needed more out of life, okay? So that, coupled with some experiences I had in mentoring, setting up some STEM scholarships for some other organizations, I realized I needed to network. I needed to ask questions. I asked so many questions of the FDA and eliminated any FDA careers available to me, and they were very limiting because I was not a US citizen. I explored some career paths. I became very self-reflective when life and circumstances throw, no options at you. You tend to become more self-reflective. I explored my visa options, and I landed on 4 career paths that I thought I could do: consulting, industry, government, and higher education. Okay. Government was out of the question within the FDA because I was not a citizen. The only thing I could do was be a reviewer, which I just absolutely would not enjoy. I went on many interviews and informational interviews and real interviews at industry. And the more I went on it, the more I didn't see myself being part of that environment. I ended up landing on consulting and higher education. And all the consulting and higher education, and both of these had some common traits like leadership, mentoring, problem solving, all the things that I liked, right? And it avoided most of the things that I don't like. Although even in this job, I don't like the Excel sheets and the databases and stuff like that. So you realize that there are some things that you're well suited for and some things that you're not. That was sort of my thought process that I wanted to share with you. Get curious, try stuff, and I'll add self-reflect. Guys, make time to go to events, career panels, lectures, workshops. It takes 1 hour, but the knowledge you can get from just hearing other people's experiences is so valuable. I wish I had that knowledge as well. Join an organization on campus. Like every time I review a resume, say it's an international person, great technical skills, awesome, awesome, awesome. Skills, papers, publications, mentoring is there. But where is the other stuff that the jobs are looking for, like leadership, collaboration, communication? That doesn't come through as much. Do some extra stuff. Try to grab some low-hanging fruit. Join like your RNA club, the postdoc association, international student orgs, some committee, volunteer, reach out. None of these activities cost you money. They cost you time, but it's investing in yourself. And none of this requires a visa. The outcome is that you get these other experiences. And guess what? When I applied for these alternative to academia jobs, which I don't like that term anyway, when I applied, I went back and highlighted all my other experiences, student organizations, and then use those transferable skills that I learned to get like leadership positions. Find out what you like and dislike, build your resume, and by default, doing all these activities builds your network. So say you're in year 2, 3, 4, even year 5. I was a postdoc in my final year, 4th years when I did all this. Informational interviews, talk to people, craft a short elevator pitch to introduce yourself, and we teach this. Prepare some questions for the interview. Ask people, what inspired you to decide this job was for you? Ask the relevant questions. What skills do I have to be good at this job? How did you navigate the visa process? What is challenging and rewarding about this position? When you ask these insightful questions, you get insightful answers that help you make decisions. So where do you start? Start with the people you know, okay? Expand to people you want to know. Use LinkedIn, Twitter, use these platforms. They exist for a reason. And what's the outcome of asking these questions? You become aware, you find something you like or dislike, and the information, I feel, informs you to make these decisions. So a lot of you had questions about building your network and your resume, and we're having these conversations all the time. And I'll share the YouTube links, and I think Louise just shared it, of the Futures YouTube channel, where we've covered resumes, we've covered LinkedIn and stuff like that. Ask yourself the question early on, what do jobs look for? Great, I have the technical skills, but am I missing, say, leadership, communication, collaboration? How do I portray to the employer that I can do this job, right? And I can stand out from all the applicants. How do you address the gaps in your resume? Check your resume every 6 months. Is it missing something? Check it every year. Is there something new added to it? Does it look the same that when you started at Hopkins or UCSD? Does your resume look the same as when you're trying to end it? Then if the answer is nothing new has been added, then find a way to enhance the sections every year. Something new, something small, right? So then how do you stand out from the crowd when applying? It really comes down, like if you are the employer, who would you want to hire? You would want to hire the right person for the position. So you have to be able to, whether it's academic positions, non-academic positions, establish fit. What are the right skill sets that you have for postdoc positions? Demonstrate an interest in a particular lab that has to come through. Well put together, customizable job application materials. And of course, this is where networking comes into play. If you have someone vouching for you, someone who knows your talents and can showcase that to others, that's always a plus. 90% of employees get jobs through an employer referral. Always think of how you can portray that you're the right candidate. So the question you may be asking, are companies willing to sponsor a visa for the right candidate? Yes, I mean, it has happened and it will continue to happen. Even with the executive order and the uncertainties, they're not going to be able to fill these highly technical positions with anybody. Like, you have the skill sets, your PhD, postdoc students, they're going to have to at some point lift. And remember, 136 days till the new election. So networking, okay, this is going to be an entire series. I feel like in my current position, like Friday night, I was sitting at 7 p.m. Someone reached out on LinkedIn, and I thought that they wanted to offer some jobs to our students. So I spoke with them. Networking is happening all the time. You could be sitting, and I mentioned this, you can be sitting, lounging in your TV, and you can like something on LinkedIn, and you've networked for the day. You know, networking is about connecting people with ideas, people with opportunities. And I like this concept of networking, relationship building, rather than what can I do for you? I don't like that approach whatsoever. And I wish people see networking as just simply building relationships. It is as simple as having a conversation, showing interest in other people's work, and expecting very little along the way. Spend a few minutes, and you've asked me, how do I network? Spend a very few minutes every other day engaging minimally in ways that other people aren't with others on LinkedIn. For example, comment on something, wish happy birthday, say congrats. LinkedIn already sort of allows you to just press one button and it says congrats to someone, right? People realize who's commenting on their stuff. People notice, people observe. Maybe if you're thinking of networking with people outside of the US, send an email to your teachers in your home country, those that in your undergrad or whatnot. Keep people posted on your career progress. When it comes to LinkedIn, there are 600 million users, and almost all of the users are outside of the US. So if you're thinking of networking abroad, use the platform to reach far across the world as well. Okay, here's what I want to say to you right now. If you don't know how to do any of this, then just ask for help. You're not expected to navigate this alone. There exists people who are willing to help other people who have gone through this as well. So let me check in with you as I'm coming to a close. How do you feel? Are you feeling empowered? Is this information helping you? Are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed out because I threw a bunch of information at you? Feel free, feeling inspired. Good. Good. You can say you're feeling stressed out because this is a lot too, because it is. Okay. Let's just say you've learned that communication is important. This is you in the middle of your path. You've learned that you have to be aware of the timelines. You've learned that you need to invest in yourself, that you need to build knowledge. Okay. And it's okay to feel empowered, yes, overwhelmed, yes, stressed, yes, informed, yes, inspired, uninspired. Any of these feelings are valid. It's a lot of information. So I want you to know, before we go on to the last point, which is action, that most of the stuff that I spoke about is accomplished gradually and over a few years. I'm still networking. I am still thinking about my next career steps. Even though you may think that I've landed on a job, you remember the path didn't end somewhere. It keeps continuing on. So I network all the time. I think about what I might do. Like the other day, I had to ask a recruiter panel, and I concluded to myself, I could start a recruiting company. That way I could help people on the other end. You know, things like that. Like you keep thinking about it. Okay, good. Overwhelmed in a good way. Okay, that's good. It's hard to do everything in addition to your work. Understood. No one's expecting you to drop your research or your thesis or your writings about 17th century, whatnot. You don't have to drop it. It's your work comes first. Just find a way to manage your own time and your expectations. It's normal to feel lost. It's very, very, very normal. Yesterday, I shared with a group of students all the rejection letters I've ever received. It's very normal to get rejected when you're applying and stressed out. So therefore, it becomes very important to focus on your mental well-being. Don't be that person like I was, where I didn't travel I didn't go anywhere for 5 years, didn't go back home. Like these are things that in hindsight later on, you're like, oh my God, I wasn't in a good place mentally, right? So focus on being kind to yourself. Take it step by step and understand that some things are out of your control. Work on things that you are in charge of. Okay. So finally, this is step 5 before we go into this awesome perspective that Luis is going to share with us. Action is a builder of confidence again, and inaction often comes out of fear. What does taking action look like? Okay, all of the above. Send emails, prepare your job materials, apply. Please follow up with people, prepare for interviews. Take a break, be kind to yourself. When you take a break and you feel refreshed, you're able to resume more efficiently. Be flexible. And by be flexible, I mean you can reframe any problem, and Luis is going to show us how to do that. Unexpected problems as well. You can reframe it and sort of try to be flexible a little bit. That was what I feel I did when I was choosing between different countries. One country would not have worked out. Then I, thought of New Zealand as well. So there's options, right? Taking one opportunity can lead to other opportunities. When I had to choose between consulting and higher ed, the consulting process was taking way too long, and I just wanted to move into something else. But consulting is still not off the table for me. So say I want to do consulting later on in my career, it's not a closed door option. Many sort of parallel paths lead to the same destination. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let Louise pull up her PowerPoint, and I will monitor the chat. And some guys had questions in the chat box, and I'll share with you the Google document as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rosny. So I want to start this conversation about what we do when the plan you had didn't work out, and how you move on and find another plan. So I was raised and born in France, and I actually started my academic journey studying microbiology in Cuba. I moved back to France to get my master and PhD. I came to the US on a G1 to do my postdoc at the Berkeley National Lab. And last year I got my green card. And now I'm working at Hopkins since last October. So I changed plan a lot, and I will share that with you, and adding life design concept with activities to help you go through that. So my first plan may feel familiar to most of you. It was to get a postdoc abroad, publish a first author in a first author paper, and then apply for a position back in France. What happened was that after 1 year, I realized that I would have to accept a toxic culture to maybe have a chance to actually get a first author paper, and I didn't want it to go through that. In the meantime, I also was feeling that I didn't enjoy that much working, doing bench work. And I also got a paper in Nature, and that opened up my possibility to get a green card as a self-employment. So this plan was quite good because it at least have a requirement. Like I needed to get this first author paper. It was what I remember that I needed for to apply for PI position, and it's great to have this kind of requirement when you do plan ahead, so you know if you are on track or not. It was not really my plan. It was more like I feel I have to do because I got a PhD, and actually a better plan will have looked like this, like much more detailed. When your application process doesn't start when you apply, when you submit your resume, but way before that. And for when you apply in academia, it starts actually when you start networking and developing skills around that. For example, grant writing. I never even did that during my postdoc. And also open up a possibility. For me, I was very focused to go back to France, but I could have also explored possibility in Europe or stay here in the US, or as Rusty mentioned, why not like New Zealand or Canada, other country. And so when I realized I couldn't pursue a career in academia, I can get stuck with these feelings that I was not good enough. And this kind of feeling and belief don't let you like move on, not let you act on them. And a way you can turn around is to reframe them. And for me, what works is to actually reframe it as only 10% of postdocs get an academic position. So I wasn't a failure. I just choose another path. And this helped me move on and explore other career options. So I came to the US because I wanted to become a PI. And now that I didn't want to be a PI anymore, should I stay in the US or move back to France? This is the three facts I have in mind. I realized it would be very hard for me to get a job with a visa, like to get someone to sponsor me if I wasn't using my scientific skill. And I was feeling that I didn't know what I wanted to do, but probably would be something with less science related and more something else. Didn't really know what, but it was going there. I reached out to the immigration lawyer, and they can analyze and give you an advice on your case for free, any lawyer, immigration lawyer. And what I learned is like, it will take me 1 or 2 years to get my green card, how much it will cost me, and what are my chances to get it. I also knew, so this is always kind of a bet, that it would be hard for me to go back to France and do my career move back there, because it's very hard in France when you get a PhD to find a job outside of your field. This is also like the official reason that I give. The unofficial reasons are more emotional reason, was I didn't want to go back to France with nothing. I already invest a lot to move to the US, in time, in money, energy, and I want to get something back from that. So I decided in September to start the green card process. It actually took me 2 years to get through that. I started to explore my career option, and I got involved with my postdoc association, just as a way just to meet people, make friends, and have a community. But when I finished my postdoc, actually 2/3 of my resume was around this experience and what I did. And it probably what gave me the job I'm right now. So I considered going to work in the industry, and I did a lot of networking events, talking with people, talking with recruiters, and this is what I learned. So as I mentioned before, so the main visa you can have in industry are H-1B and O1. There are two different things, but they will always be related with your scientific skill. What was my scientific skill what was my area of expertise, and this is something. Is first the first thing you need to learn if you want to go to industry. What is your area of expertise and how you apply in industry? For example, being a protein crystallographer is actually not that used in industry. I was asking around with a company in the Bay Area, and they were like 1 of 2 positions, so it's very hard to get. What I learned after, but I already moved on another plan, was like actually in the UK you have a big cluster around the cyclotron in the diamond cyclotron. So there is a lot of possibility to do so. My other area of expertise, but then I would have to move to the UK, and I don't want to do that at this time, is protein biochemistry. This is much broader. I'm not a very in protein biochemistry, I'm not a very good one. I'm not standing out. And also in the industry setup, this kind of position tend to be very routine experiments. So it's kind of take out all the fun of the biochemistry experiment that you can have in academia. I also explore, okay, what if I don't want to be at the bench? And there exists a lot of different positions in industry if you don't want to be at the bench, but have a background in science. But there's not that many entry positions. So that means that you need to get in, be at the bench for a few years, and then you move on. And for me, it feels like a long time at this point. So I get a lot of information. My only regret with this exploration path is I never applied for a position, and it's actually part of the action you can take, and it's actually a good thing to do, because when you apply for the position, what kick in is your imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I'm not prepared enough. I don't meet all of the requirements. No one never meets all the requirements of the job position, apart if it was writing for you. And apply and actually kind of get this out of the way. You let the recruiter do their job and select if you are a good fit or not. So I think, and also give you more feedback, like you can practice going through an interview, going through this process and learn more, because the hiring process is a two-way. They learn about you and you learn about them. As Rosny, and probably a lot of you are also consider going to consulting. What's great with consulting is the hiring process is seasonal and is very well structured. So you can it's very easy to make a plan. So in spring, I applied. They have a lot of weekend for people who want to go to consulting position. And I get in the McKinsey Insight weekend in June. And I say, okay, I will do that. And then, you know, I will practice for case interview all summer and apply in August. So I didn't get in August. I just went for the first round of interview with McKinsey. What I learned from that is, so the big consulting firm have their own pipeline with specific school. And if you are not part of this school, it's kind of hard to get into the hiring process. It's not impossible, but it's harder. They do have a specific process for data scientist engineering. So look at this, is a kind of another way to get in. A lot of people try to go for the 3 big ones, and there's actually a lot of small ones. This is perhaps more for people with background in biotech, but there's a lot of small one with more like pharma and biotech related that sometimes easy to get in and also can be actually very fun. It's kind of a different setup, but look for this too. Here, so my plan was quite good because, you know, it's seasonal hiring process, so you know what you are supposed to do. It was still a default plan, and I think emotionally, I also wanted to go there because then I feel like my PhD wasn't a waste, and I will go back to this just after that. And also, since I get into the McKinsey weekend, I feel like people think I'm good for this, so I should pursue this path. So always, when you're good for something, always ask yourself if you like it, actually. You don't have to do stuff just because you are good at it. And ask yourself if you're happy there. I attended this weekend and I didn't belong there. I didn't have a great time. I had a time to connect with people. And sometimes you just need to acknowledge that different environment, different working, different company have different culture, and you may fit or not in different of them. So check this out and listen to yourself. So yeah, I have to confront these feelings that if I didn't want to work at the bench, then my PhD was a waste. And I reframe it exactly the same way that Rosny did. Was identify transferable skills that I actually acquire. So it can be other experiences you had during your PhD, but it also can be like analyze complex data. It can be stuff that you did during your PhD was part of your research, but you can extrapolate for other things like public speaking, writing. Writing stuff is a different, like it can be technical document, it can be more also for other purpose. And now I want to integrate some design thinking concepts and how this can help you make a good plan and especially try it out. So first, you need to accept where you are. And this is something we miss a lot of time. For me was, okay, I am not getting a PI position and what I do now. So what do you feel about it? And take time to process how do you feel and to separate your different feelings so you can act on them. And then you need to define what is the problem you actually try to answer, and you may want to reframe. With live design, we always think about try to get away from gravity problem. Gravity problem and problem you cannot change. So try to identify them and put them aside and act on problem you actually can have an action on them. So problem you may have, you want to define is, so what I am good at, and also what do I like. So Rosny touched base on this just before, and with a live design lab, we have actually activity you can do to go through that. So you will list all the activity you do, and for each of them, you will determine how it engages you and how much it energizes you. This is a two-way. So we are thinking about how I'm passionate, inspired. So this is a two-way that live design define. And then you can actually extract these activities that you are engaged with and energize you and translate them and see how they can apply in other career. So what does my plan look right now? And because thinking about your next move in your career, you will never stop doing that. You're always doing this, even after 30 years. So for me, what now I need to accept is I may have to go back to France sooner than what I expected. And for you and for a lot of international people now is, okay, what happens if I cannot renew my visa? So here you need to first empathize how it makes you feel and take time to process that. Me, and this is very weird, but at some point, sometimes I feel a little relieved. because I always have it in my mind this, okay, should I stay, should I go, should I stay, should I go? And some point if someone says, now you need to go, but this is very specific to my own background and where I am right now, I will feel relieved that, okay, now I need to focus how I go back to France. And this is my only thing I need to focus on. I feel this way too, because I feel like now I did know everything I wanted to do in the US, but enough that I can go back and build on this. I know that I want to stay in higher ed, but I'm still figuring out how. Now I'm working with undergraduate students. I may work with other student population. I may also go, especially if I go back to Europe, with international collaboration or project management more related to scientific program. I did the main way, informal interview always. This presentation, in general, I do presentation and workshop with undergraduate students, and now I'm trying out how it is to do it with graduate student and postdoc. So thank you, Rosny, for this opportunity. And I'm also, for this summer, working on setting up a panel for French organizations on building. You can also build new network with collaborating with other people and doing things for other people. It's a very great way to build up your network. But I'm also considering, because everyone has always a lot of different plans, working for a nonprofit organization, and for that I'm volunteering. Okay, so what was the takeaway of this presentation? I think we repeated enough is knowledge. If you don't know what is around you, what about yourself, but also what is there for you and where you can go, is no way you can make a good plan. And this is an ongoing process, always acquire more knowledge. And you don't have to do all by yourself. You can also have group, like you can get together with your peers, with your colleague, and work on this together. So you don't have to go through that alone. And then there's action. A plan is not a plan until you take action. And this can be prototype. You don't have to just to quit your job and start something else. It can be small action you take during your day. So informality is one, networking on LinkedIn. It can be also doing stuff to see if you like them and if you are good at it. Timeline is very important. What are you constrained? Especially as an international student, you need to have this always in mind. And also, what are your milestones? So for example, one of my friends, she's applying for academic position, and she decided, and this is, she decided that she will apply for two rounds, like 2 years, and then she will move on. If she don't get in after 2 years, she just move on. She don't want to get stuck here forever. So you can also decide how much time you want to spend on a plan, and then you move for another one. This doesn't mean that you will never go back to that. Like I could at some point decide I want to move to industry and, for example, work in training in industry or other stuff. But for now, I want to move on and do something else. Always go back to yourself, invest in yourself, and also think about your mental health. Perhaps like I had to decide that I didn't want to go to academia because the path to in front of me, I think, was too hard on me and will affect too much my mental health. And I decided I will move on. So always go back to that. And then once you have your plan, it's super important to communicate about this. So to get more knowledge, but also for people to support you, especially your colleague, your PI. If they're Americans and may not know what you are going through, it's super important to educate the employer, your future employer also, and also your family and friends so they can support you. So that's it for me. And I think we can open it up for a question.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for people that have stuck around towards the end. We timed ourselves perfectly, and I think I'm giving access to all of you for the Google document. I didn't realize that every single person I would need to give access, so sorry about that. If anybody has questions, now is the time to ask it. Any other questions that we haven't compared? Yeah, how to prepare oneself for both industry and academia? Should you, so that one can grab opportunities? Okay, so yes. So how do you prepare for both industry and academia? Know that industry is going to take something different. The application materials, the technique, the strategy is going to be a little different from academia, right? For industry, for example, and I've outlined this in the Google Doc as well. For industry, for example, you're going to be working in a fast-paced environment. You don't have to do grant writing like you do in academia. You get paid a little more in industry rather than academics. In terms of your job application material, for your industry, you use what is called a resume versus what is a CV for an academic institution. For an academic institution, You'll provide research statement, a teaching statement, a diversity statement, and I've shared with you in the Google Doc links to the academic job search series. So you can view all the academic options as well. But for industry, realize that you're going to be thinking about how to appear for the good, as a good fit for industry. You're going to think about how to employ little keywords from the job description into your industry application. And you should prepare for both, which means you would have to prepare 2 versions of your CV/resume. You would have to do twice the amount of networking and twice the amount of looking and searching for positions. Okay, so that answers that. You'll see more answers and links in the Google document as well. Okay, all the ones in the other meeting. Hey guys, before you go, don't forget that I will be sending you a little survey form. I just put it in here, and I will give you access to the Google form as well. Some of you asked, when should you talk to recruiters about your visa sponsorship opportunities? As you saw in the PowerPoint, it's best to have these conversations early, but I want to make a point that don't lead your conversation with asking, do you sponsor visas? Because that's like a turnoff. You want to appear like the good fit for the position. That's what you should be speaking about first, but definitely you need to have conversations later on about your visa status. Will industrial employers be more willing to hire ones that can work immediately? Correct. Some industry employers are willing to wait. Some industry employers will wait for the right candidate. It'll wait for you to have all the processing that needs to be done. Some won't wait. You need to figure that out during the first call with your recruiter or with the hiring manager. Are you willing to wait, and give them an estimation of the timeline? How do J1 visas deal with this problem, since we need more time to process the status change? Correct. Which means you need to get your no objection statement before you even look for while you're thinking about looking for a job. You need a job offer first before you can apply for the J1 waiver process. For example, if you're for the most part, for example, if you're at the NIH, you need a job offer before they can even think about giving you the J1 waiver documentation, right? So how do you deal with this problem? You deal with it by planning in advance. Okay, you don't leave it to the last minute. Otherwise, really, people are not able to wait for you as well. Yes, I will share the PowerPoint. I will share the YouTube video, and I will share the Google Docs. Everything in an email that's going to come to you after this conversation. Any other questions you may have about industry? Yes, I'm sharing all that. Any other questions that you may have about industry, academia, humanities, and social sciences? You can always feel free to reach out, okay? Any other questions? Thank you for filling out the survey. Those dings are all the survey coming through. Thank you, Louise, for sharing your perspective, which is important and different from mine. Thank you for that. Thank you everyone for being so engaging and sharing where you're from in the chat box. These make these virtual meetings much more fun. If you don't have any other questions, if you have follow-up questions, email us. If not, then we'll close the meeting. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, you can contact with follow-up questions. That's what we're here for.